Hi guys, welcome back. So this is video 5, which is for module 1 of the project that we've now moved on into deepening that personal relationship between the brand stroke marketeer and the customer. This particular module deals with something called JFU, and I've touched on this very briefly. I've mentioned this in previous videos, which is just for you. Just for you, it really is all about using established affinity interests to strengthen the relationship and anticipate desired products. So if we start thinking about our customers, there are certain affinity and interests that those customers will have which are stronger than a lot of other interests, and I'm especially thinking of areas where you could describe fandom. Or something that is actually bordering on obsession. The two examples that are really coming to mind in terms of fashion or clothing are football clubs or something like Porsche branded fashion goods. These are areas that we can use to strengthen that relationship, and if they showed past sales ledger purchasing based in any of these areas, we can record that and we can use that to try and cross-sell and upsell to the customer. Okay, so to start off with, let's go back into the database. Okay, here we are. If we go into the master ledger, and again we're going to continue dealing with customer George Bailey that we used for the previous emails of the retail sales ezine. If we scroll across, we have a field name called SKU brand. Here it is. Now, SKU brand is something that sits over and above what would be your usual SKU supplier. So we're not talking necessarily about Levi or Adidas. We're talking about something that does have more of an obsessional meaning behind it. So we are talking about football clubs. We are talking about things like Porsche branded products and so forth. So George, we know here in the sales ledger that George bought an Arsenal home shirt, and so in this field for SKU brand we have got Arsenal FC. Beneath that I've added Vans as a SKU brand. Now Vans is not what I would call in any way that kind of obsessional type of property. I've simply put it in here because I need something else to exemplify the code that I'm going to produce. So the objective for this module is how do we go through those SKU brands and how do we pick up any just for you products based on these SKU brand fields, if there's anything that's currently marketable, if there's anything that the store is currently specifically marketing. Okay, so let's now go back into the code. There we go. And I'm going to start a new page. Passmod 1 JFY. So that's personal relationship as a service, mod 1 just for you. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm just going to put some comments up for this. So what you're going to notice now is I'm going to start going into a lot more detail about the coding than I did for the much simpler retail sales ezine. So I'm just going to put some comments here describing what this module is going to be. Bear in mind that we're going to end up with a number of modules that we're going to use to deepen that personal relationship. So I want to put as much information in here as I can to make sure that as we look back retrospectively, we know exactly which module this is and what it's dealing with. Okay, so here I'm talking about something that's going to be relevant to all of the modules. I'm talking about Module 1 implements a container for the insertion of the SKU brand. So that's the SKU brand field that I was just showing you. So all of our modules are going to have containers. They're going to implement a container for different component parts of the ezine. And this is the first one, dealing with just for you. So again, I'm just going to come down. I'm going to do the usual. So I'm going to include Okay, so you will remember this. This is actually what brings in the login credentials for the database and for the TOST MySQL database. One of the things you're going to notice as I'm doing this, and I've just noticed I've got a typo here, is that whereas previously and whereas in actuality in terms of a directory structure we only ever need to step back once, here you'll see that I'm actually stepping back twice. That's not actually relative to the pathway that we're using, but there is a reason why I need to step back twice, which I'll come on to a little bit later as we talk about this module. Again, I'm gonna suppress notices. Okay. You can, if you want to, keep these notices reporting. I just find them particularly annoying. Okay. Notice. There we go. So that suppressed those notices. The notices are usually just guides, as you'll know, in PHP. Again, I'm going to increase my timeout processing to 10 seconds. If you are dealing with really large data sets, you know, you could be dealing with millions of records, you would need probably to increase this even further. Okay, so that's any set maximum execution time, and that is going to go to 600 seconds. So 600 seconds is so what did I say there? It's 10 minutes. There you go. Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm now going to establish two variables which we're going to use here. One of them is going to be something called history. Here we go. And history I'm going to set at a number that you will now be aware of, 7,776,000, which in terms of seconds is equivalent to 90 days. And I'm also going to set up temporarily, and I'll come back on this later, account holder equals, and it's 45112309. So that is the account number of George Bailey, who is the customer that we're going to continue to use as an example for the videos. Now what I want to do, I need to get some information in terms of what appropriate SKU brands are available for George Bailey. I mean, we were just looking at the database and we could see that there was an Arsenal FC one in there, and I also added that fans one just for purposes of demonstration. So now what I'm going to do, we are going to, again, you'll recognize this, so we're going to come MySQLi equals new MySQLi, and now we're going to bring in all of the variables that we took from CSE DB connect.php. So that is the host, and this one is going to be the user, and this one is going to be the password. Okay, and remember, it's all coming from the TOST database. There you go. So now I'm going to set up my select statement, or my select query for MySQL. Okay, so I've set up the query. So we have mod result equals MySQLi error query. We're going to select the SKU brand from the master ledger where account number equals account holder. So that is the account holder here, and of course we know that's George Bailey. And the conditions are, and SKU brand is not empty, and epoch is greater than time minus history, and of course there's the history variable over here, and that's the 90 days in seconds. We're going to order this by epoch, in descending order, and we're going to limit results to 10. Now bear in mind, depending on how much the customer has purchased, you could end up in 90 days with, you know, let's say if he's a really good customer, potentially, you know, over 10 products which have a SKU brand. We're only going to want to find one, and that would be the most recent one, where there is also not only do they appear in the database field, but also that they are marketable, that they are currently being used potentially for marketing promotion, and that's why we're gonna bring as many of them as we can, but with a maximum limit of 10, so that we can sort through them and see which ones are the most eligible and the most relevant. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is we're going to do another fetch assoc, so we're going to do another fetch associative array. So come here, let's do mod I equals 0, and then again we're going to set up the while statement, the while loop, while row equals mod result fetch assoc. Okay, and now within here we are going to say SKU. I'm going to set up another array variable, so I'm going to say, let's have a look, SKU brand $mod I equals row SKU brand. Okay, and then we're going to increment mod I by 1. Okay, so that's that. So what we've done here, we have taken that selected SKU brand from the MySQLi query, and we've now added the results into the SKU brand array variable. So that will have captured both the Vans and the Arsenal FC SKU brands that we have for George Bailey, and it will have done it in descending order. So I know that the Vans purchase was the latest one, followed by the Arsenal FC one. Okay, so I think now what we are going to do is let's display. Um, in fact, let's just do a little test on this one, because what I want to now do is show you that we are actually going to be pulling those up. So if we come here, just going to do echo SKU brand mod I. Okay, we should now be able to run this code, and it should bring up both Vans and Arsenal. Let me just save this. Okay. Okay, so I've got a fresh tab in Chrome, so let's just load that page and see what happens. Remember, what we should see is output to the screen Vans and Arsenal FC. Yep, there you go. So we know that that's actually working. Okay, so let's go back into the code, because yeah, okay, that's absolutely fine. So we know that it's correctly selected from the last 90 days the available SKU brands, and there were only 2 of them for George Bailey. What we now need to know is, are they, from a marketing perspective, are they eligible? Has Tim's online store actually made them eligible for marketing? And if so, how do we actually verify that? So let me just go into the file structure that I've got here, because this is key. So you will recognize here, this is the structure that contains all of the images that we've used to make up the ezine. So we've got aspirational, boys fashions, etc. And here we've got just for you. This is the folder that's going to contain any of the images, any of the product shots that we can select for and use for just for you. Sitting in here, there is indeed a subfolder called Arsenal FC. Notice there is not a subfolder for Vans, and what that basically means is that we can actually use this file structure to check whether or not this is actually marketable from a just for you perspective. So if I go into Arsenal FC, you can see there's 3 images, 1, 2 and 3.jpg. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use this to check and to see if these files exist, or if 1.jpg exists within the Arsenal FC subfolder, and if it does, then that means yes, it is actually marketable. Okay, so let me just make some more changes to the code, and then I'll come back and explain exactly how we're going to do that. Okay, so I've added some more of the code. So let me just run through how we're going to check if that JPG file actually exists. So first of all, we start off with the if statement. So we've got if count SKU brand, i.e. what that means is, does the variable actually have any content, SKU brand? If it does, then it's gonna go on to a loop, a while loop. So we've got mod I equals 0, while mod I is less than count of SKU brand, which means it's going to cycle through all of the available arrays within SKU brand. If file exists, and here we go, and we've now got the pathway for the JPG files sitting on the file structure I just showed you, which is here within the just for you folder, where we've got Arsenal FC and we've got the 3 JPGs. So if file exists, step back, CSE email media just for you, SKU brand mod I /1.jpg. Now we know that in terms of SKU brand, there's actually only one variable. Vans doesn't have an image, so it's not going to find a file. The file doesn't exist. The directory doesn't exist. Whereas this if statement is going to prove true for Arsenal FC, because it does indeed have 3 JPGs sitting in the Arsenal FC folder. So if that is true, it's going to echo yes, SKUbrand mod I, which will be Arsenal FC exists. I've also added in here another variable, jfu equals string to lower for SKUbrand mod I. I'll come back to that a little bit later on. And then it's going to increment mod I by 1, and it will carry on with the while loop, going through all possible pieces of data which we extracted from the previous select query. Okay, so if we now go and actually run this, what we should see, and the only thing that should actually be output to the screen, should be Arsenal FC exists. So let's see what happens. Okay, so I've got another fresh tab, so let's see what happens. Yes, Arsenal FC exists, and correctly Vans doesn't appear because there is no directory containing a JPG file for Vans. Okay, so let's go back to the coding. Let me now talk a little bit more about what the container entails. So ultimately, into the retail sales ezine that we created, the modules that we are now developing for the personal relationship that we're developing are going to be added as containers only if they are selected and only if they are eligible. So this is a container that is eligible. The Arsenal FC product, and it is eligible for the ezine that is going to go to George Bailey. So what we now need to do is to create the actual code that's going to sit within the container, and we can then port that over and into the ezine code. So let me just go on and do this, and then I'll explain how this is all going to work. Okay, so I've added the remainder of the code. So let's just run through how this is all going to work. Firstly, earlier on I put jfu equals string to lower SKUbrand mod I. One of the reasons that I did that, obviously, because we're going to use SKUbrand mod I as part of the pathway to lead to those JPEG graphics for the email, and because it's an Apache-based server, it's actually case sensitive, so you want to make sure that your pathway is all in the right case. So here we have a new variable, container jfu equals, and what is now sitting within this is something you're going to recognize, because this is the same variable sections, or based on the same variable sections that we had in the original retail ezine coding. So this is the HTML that contains the HTML formatting, table formatting, and also it's got 3 images, whereas previously we had 4 images, such as for men's fashions or men's footwear. Just for You has 3 images, and these have basically now gone in exactly the same way that we did the previous ones. So first of all, here we have the href, which is the click-through link for the image, and each of the 3 images obviously will have this. And then if we come across here, so here is actually the first image, and how we've actually achieved the customization is exactly the same, as very similar to how we've done the aspirational shots and the other sections that which have appeared within the ezine. So here you've got the pathway, http://www.techview virtuosity.com /media/just-for-you/ and this is where we put in the JFU variable, so that's the one that we changed to lowercase, /1.jpg, and then if I just quickly scroll across, we've got another one here for 2.jpg, and we've got the last image which is here for 3.jpg, and all of these have got their own href click-throughs as well. Okay, so if I come back, so this is the code. This is very, very similar, almost identical to the ones that you've already seen in the ezine. The only difference is that I'm calling this a container because this is something that we're going to port or import into that ezine script. One, if we select it as part of the service, which obviously moves on to phase 3 of this project, which we aren't tackling yet. And two, if it's eligible. So if there's any of those SKU brands or what is the most recent SKU brand which actually has a marketable folder set up on in the FTP structure. Okay. Then the rest of this loop, you're just going to message here that outputs to the screen that the JFY container is attached if successful. Else, no, it doesn't exist. That's it. That is the only code that we need for this module. Now it isn't quite as simple as that because we now need to actually bring that in to the ezine coding. So I'm going to reuse send newsletter.php, which is what we used previously to send out that retail sales ezine. I've slightly changed it, so we're now talking about send newsletter modular.php here. This is identical scripting. This is identical coding to what we previously had. I've made very few changes to it, and I'm just going to go through those changes now. So what I have added here, I've added two things. The first thing that I've done is I've added history equals 90 days in seconds, 7,776,000 seconds. Account holder equals customer 0. Now that was part of the array that I've already taken you through here, and that will bring up the account number. So that will bring up George Bailey's account number. And now I've added an extra include statement, and this time we're going to include pass modules, passmod1 jfy.php. So that is this new page that we've just created there. And what that will do is that will basically send back to this page the variable which the container variable that we've just set up, container.jfu. Yeah. So if we now come right down to the section where we actually concatenate all of the relevant sections of the ezine, here we go. That's these ones here, which we've already been through. You'll see at the end here I've added container JFU. So when we run or when we load send newsletter modular.php, it's going to do all of the things that send newsletter.php did, but the other thing is it's going to include this new page, passmod1 jfy.php, and that is going to give it container JFU, and that's going to add that to George Bailey's ezine, and it's going to add it, one, because it's marketable, and two, it's marketable in the sense that it's been set up with a marketable folder in the FTP structure, and it's marketable or it's eligible because it is, or you do have, George does have a most recent SKU brand sitting within his 90-day sales. Otherwise this wouldn't, the container JFU would be empty. It would be an empty string, in the same way that all of these junior all of these junior strings are also empty because he has made a junior sales in the last 90 days. So let's test this and let's see if this happens. Okay, so we've got a fresh tab in Chrome. So let's now load that PHP page. Okay, I've got it here. Send newsletter modular.php. Let's see what happens. Okay, it's done it correctly. So we can see from the output up here, no, Vans doesn't exist. Correct. Yes, Arsenal FC exists. Correct. JFY container attached, so it has correctly inserted this into the ezine. So let's just go into my Gmail, and here it is. George, check out our new spring summer range. There we go. So this ezine will be exactly as it was in the previous videos. The only difference is if this has worked and that container has been correctly attached, the just for you section is going to appear at the bottom. Yes, it has. So there you go. So we can see there is now an Arsenal polo shirt, Arsenal socks, and some Arsenal shorts. All of these are clickable, and they've each carried their unique variable has been attached to the URL to make sure that PHP will direct you to the correct product landing page. Okay, excellent. Okay, so we have successfully finished module 1. Obviously it needs a little bit of fine-tuning in terms of how do you incorporate that into personal relationship as a service, but obviously that service is going to be phase 3. And before then we've got a lot more modules that we need to create. This is probably the simplest of the modules, and from here on in they are going to get increasingly difficult as we start to develop that personal relationship even more. Thanks for watching, and look forward to seeing you again for my next video.